Good morning, yogis. I'm about to lead you on a 40-minute or so yin yoga practice, introducing you to some of the shapes, and also just letting you experience yin yoga for yourself before we dive into more of the strategies of teaching it. Yin yoga can be used for gaining flexibility and stretching muscles, yes, but even more so it's about the health of the connective tissues. There are a few principles that you should know, anyone should know, as teachers and as your students when you begin to teach. And these are the principles of yin yoga. One is called the Goldilocks principle. So this is kind of like it's not too hot, it's not too cold. So what that means is as you start to enter a posture, you would want to go in only as deep as you can still breathe and be calm. Obviously, there's a place you could stretch in any pose that would cause you to stress and get anxious and be uncomfortable. And that's not the goal of yin yoga. When you stretch, you want to be at that point where you've just come up against your edge, but it's not overwhelming. The second principle is time. So in a yin posture, you'll hold the pose anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes 10 minutes. And what this does is it gives time to affect the yin tissues, which are the connective tissues, the joint capsules, the fascia, not the muscle. So the muscle can respond to shorter stretches, but the yin tissues need that longer time to be affected. And then the third principle is stillness. So when you go into the pose, the idea is that you would stay put and avoid the fidgets and the adjustments once you get into the pose. There's a few reasons you would move though. You can move while in the hold if you have gone too deep and you're experiencing pain and discomfort and you need to come out. Make a little adjustment to get comfortable, find that Goldilocks position. And also if you met an edge and then during the time that you've been holding the pose, the edge has shifted and now you can stretch a little deeper comfortably. That's another reason you would move. So you're always meeting that edge. And those are the three principles of yin. When research has shown, when you stretch a yin tissue, connective tissue, it actually squeezes all the fluid out of that tissue. When you release the stretch and the tissues come back together and come out of the stretch, they also draw in all of the surrounding fluids. And so we rehydrate connective tissues this way. And that's really important to maintain elasticity and comfortable range of motion in the joints and the fascia. So as we get started, make sure you have a few props. I didn't have blocks at home, but if you have blocks around, grab some. I did have a pillow or two. A big blanket, because when you're not moving and building heat, it's normal to get a little chilled. So it's good to have this around. And again, if you have any props like a block or something that's block-like, that can be helpful as well, especially if you're tight. And we're going to get started on our hands and knees, just some simple movement to calm the nervous system and get any jitters out. We're going to be doing some cat-cows. So on your hands and your knees, just begin to move through some cat-cows. When you transition into the cat, ease your hips towards your heels to really stretch out your back body. You can start to tune into your breath here and just slow down the breathing. Become a little more in tune with how your body's feeling this morning. Remember that with each exhale, you're going to be really rounding your spine back and sinking your hips towards the heels, maybe even taking a pause in that stretch. Looks similar to a child's pose before coming back into cow again. Arching and rounding the spine, and the next time that you come back into that child's pose shape, go ahead and widen the knees and just sink the hips back and down towards the heels and relax here for a few rounds of breath. Resting here, you'll want to cue your students in at this time to check in with stillness and how they're responding to being still. So this would be a good time to just remind them that this is a very slow, still practice, and check in with their comfort level in just being still. Make your way up to a seat, take your time, and you're going to widen the legs. So as the legs stretch out, we're going to move into our first yin posture. I recommend grabbing the blanket and sliding it underneath the hips. Even if you're feeling flexible, this helps to bring the pelvis into a forward tilt. Some of your students will stay upright here because they can't get the rounding out of the low back. Some of your students will come right on down over their props. Some students lying right on down to the floor. So it just depends on the flexibility of the student you're working with. Go ahead and find your comfort level. I'm going to briefly demonstrate what some of your students will look like. So some of them might be up on their hands. Some might be sitting upright with their hands behind them, placed on the floor outside the hips. And you just want to encourage your students to be at a level that feels good to them and remind them they can move at any time during the hold to deepen it and to just be present to what's changing in their bodies. So for you, you can go ahead and settle into the shape that feels best, find your comfortable edge, and relax and breathe. This posture is called dragonfly pose in the yin world. You'll find that all of the postures have different names from the ones that you might have learned in hatha yang style. So dragonfly pose opens the hips, the groins, the backs of the thighs, inner knees. Some contraindications would be having a really tight low back or low back disorders, which doesn't allow the spine to flex forward. In that case, you would want to keep the back as straight as you can and encourage your students to stay upright. To get into the pose, we just took the legs wide and walked the hands forward, hinged at the hips. You can come to elbows or blocks or supports. And again, alternatives to the posture would be bringing the hips up a little bit higher. So I'm only on a blanket here, but if you wanted to, you could have a student sit up on a block. The joints affected in dragonfly pose would be the hips and the low back and the knees. You want to hold the pose, recommended for about 3 to 10 minutes. The yang name for this is Upavishta Konasana, FYI. And in all of these yin poses, there are certain meridians and organs that are affected. So for this one, it's the urinary bladder on the backs of the legs and on the back, and the liver and kidney lines through the groin, and the spleen through the inner knees. So in order to let you really enjoy the pose, I'm going to just let you sit here for a few more minutes. I'm just relaxing, and when you feel like maybe you want to go a little bit deeper, you could always remove some of the props from beneath you. Try to stay with your breath. Avoid fidgeting if it's not necessary, and I'll cue you out when ready. Slowly, slowly slide the hands underneath you and in a very unrushed way, make your way up to sit. Just take your time. Our next posture is going to be a seated twist called Ardha Matsyendrasana. So as you come to sit, you can have your left leg on the floor, crossing your right foot over the outside of the left knee. You can see how I'm positioning myself in the video. If you needed, you could always have some sort of prop beneath your hips to support the lift of your pelvis. Left elbow or left forearm wrapping the right shin. I'm feeling a little flexible this morning, so I'm going with the elbow outside the knee, but if you felt a little tight, you could always wrap the front of the shin with the left elbow instead. Right fingertips to the floor behind you. If you had a student that had a hard time getting their right foot outside their knee, like I'm showing in the video, you could have their foot to the inside of the knee to modify. And just like all the yin postures, here for a few minutes, just allowing the spine to twist. As you can imagine, the joints of the spine are affected in this pose, mostly the lumbar and sacrum. And you might also feel the joints around the rib cage as well, getting some juice here too. Also, being in a twist affects the internal organs, so you're literally rinsing out excess blood, toxins, metabolic waste from your organ tissues, and that way when you unwind from the twist, your organs will reabsorb the surrounding fluids and be hydrated and cleansed. The meridians and organs affected here are the stomach and the spleen meridians, also the kidney lines and the urinary bladder. If you feel a twist also through the side of the rib cage, could also get into the gallbladder meridian as well. Once again, I'm going to leave you here to enjoy this twist in silence for a few moments. So just close your eyes, come into your breath, clear your mind, and enjoy the twist. Begin to come out very slowly. Just let your spine unwind. Take a seat and just pause for a moment with your hands at your knees, your lap, noticing the difference between the right and left side. So you should be able to tune into specifically the muscles that run up and down the spine on the right and the left, and feel maybe that one side is a little more open than the other. There's no right or wrong answer here, just this practice of noticing helping us to become more present and aware of what's happening inside. And let's go ahead and move to the other side. So on this side, you'll have your right leg on bottom, your left leg on top. Left foot outside the right knee if you can manage. Remember, you can modify by placing the foot to the other side of the knee. Left fingertips go back, and maybe the right elbow hooks the shin. Maybe it wraps around the outside of the knee like I'm doing in the video. Find a comfort level for yourself or your students, and remember, if the low back is really rounded here and they can't quite get the pelvis to a neutral position, the spine won't be able to lengthen well. So always recommending a blanket under the hips if that's an issue for your students. I like to reach down and grab the big toe or hook the foot here. It just gives me a little more stability. So if you have room to do that, you're welcome to try that out. And then just turning the chin over the back shoulder, maybe letting the eyes close. And just relaxing here. I'll leave you here to just absorb the twist for a few moments. Go ahead and very slowly begin to unwind. From your twist, come again to a comfortable seat. Place the hands at the knees and just tune in and noticing maybe what's different, what's the same now. Maybe you can feel that there's a stretch happening more evenly on right and left sides of the spine. Our next posture is going to be butterfly pose. So in butterfly, sitting up on a support is really helpful, as I'm doing in the video. Soles of the feet together, the knees falling out wide. Some students might be more comfortable with some kind of prop underneath the outsides of the knees. It's not necessary, but I've chosen to do that for myself in the video. This is a great way to stretch the lower back without requiring really loose hamstrings. So you can enjoy that long stretch in the lumbar spine here. It's also good for the kidneys. The particular meridians affected are the gallbladder lines on the outsides of the legs, urinary bladder lines running along the spine in the lower back. If the feet are in really close to the groin and a stretch is felt in the inner thighs, then the kidney and liver lines are being stimulated as well. The joints affected are the hips and the lower spine. This posture is one that's recommended to hold for 3 to 5 minutes, but you can hold it longer if you would like, if you desire. I like to do this pose when I'm sitting on the floor working on the computer or talking on the phone. Similar posture in the yang version is Baddha Konasana. You'll find that in butterfly pose in the yin version, we're letting the spine round here, not really worrying about lengthening the spine like we do in a lot of the yang practices. You'll want to instruct your students to Maybe let their head hang. If their head can't rest on the floor, placing a block underneath the forehead can be a nice variation. You can also set a bolster underneath the chest if the student can't come down far enough to rest. Some of the contraindications could be that this pose could aggravate sciatica. If you have sciatica, elevating the hips by sitting up higher on a cushion can definitely help. You can slowly start to lift up. Remember to move slowly out of these yin postures, just bringing yourself slowly to sit and maybe taking some neck rolls. We're going to be moving onto our back, so slide some props off to the side, come all the way down, and just rest here for a moment with the knees bent. Place your hands on your belly, your chest, and just feel your breath for a few moments. Allowing your low back to settle after that forward flexion, and just tuning into the quality of your breathing here, quality of your attention here. You might feel much more naturally drawn inward with such a slow meditative practice like yin. So I'm getting set up for Banana Asana. This is my favorite yin pose. It's a little chilly, so I'm stretching that blanket out on my legs. This is why having props and blankets nearby can be really great for students, so I always have them grab blankets at the studio. In Banana Asana, you're wanting to make your whole body resemble the shape of a banana. It stretches the whole side of the body, so what you'll do is walk your legs off to the left, cross your right ankle over your left ankle, and then reach overhead, hold your elbows, and start to shuffle your upper body over to the left as well. It works the spine into lateral flexion, which is a side bend, from the IT band all the way up through the side ribs. It also stretches the oblique muscles and the side of the stomach and the intercostals between the ribs. And you can even get up into the upper chest and armpit area with the arms overhead like this. Do make sure that your hips are still level. You don't want to go so far that your pelvis starts to tip. So feel level in your hips. As you find your edge, relax here. Some of the meridians and organs affected are the gallbladder meridian, which runs along the side of the body. And if the arms are overhead, as I have in the video, then you can also stimulate the heart and the lung meridians as well. The joints affected are the spine, the rib cage as well. Holding this pose 3 to 5 minutes typically. I'm going to let you just marinate here for a few more moments. And slowly start to come out. So nice and slowly just return to neutral and just pause for a few moments here on your back. Feeling what's different, what's changed, maybe stretch. And then move to the other side. So walk your ankles over to the right, cross your left ankle over your right ankle, shuffle your upper body to the right as well, create that banana-like shape on the other side, and rest. slowly start to come out. Shift yourself back through center, just taking a pause on your back, feeling any changes, internal shifts as you return to neutral. Breathing into the belly, into the ribs, into the chest. We're going to be moving into our next posture, which is going to be a reclined twist. So you'll bring your knees first into your chest, giving yourself a nice big squeeze. I'm going to place this little pillow outside the left side as I bring my knees down to it. And then extend the right arm out to the right. In this pose, some students will prefer having the bolster or blanket under the knees. Some will prefer having it between the knees. You can offer both. And again, hold for about 3 to 5 minutes so that the spine can really settle into this twist. It helps to release a lot of tight muscles along the back. Very similar to the seated twist we took earlier, except this one invites a little more relaxation as we're lying down, so you can really settle in and let gravity pull you deep into the shape. I'm going to leave you here to enjoy the twist for a few moments. slowly bring your head back to center. Bring the legs back up to neutral. And we're just gonna plop that pillow off to the right side and switch, knees dropping down to the right. And then opening up to the opposite side of the room with the upper body. Again, settle in, close the eyes, and just give yourself to gravity. Allowing the next few minutes to be a chance for you to totally relax, rest your mind, deepen your breath, sink deep into the shape. Slowly start to bring yourself back through neutral. You're gonna line your back for Shavasana at this time. So get comfortable, feet about hip width or wider, toes can roll out. Savasana being the most important part of the whole practice because we let all these changes sink in and take place in the body, mind. Just let yourself sink into the floor. We'll be here for a few minutes. And at this time, you can either stay in Shavasana or start to make your way out. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about Yin Yoga. There's so much more to learn about this practice. I recommend visiting some of the links I'll include at the end of this video if you'd like to learn more. I hope that you enjoyed that yin practice. We only did maybe 5 postures in that 45-minute practice, which is pretty standard when you teach a yin yoga class, because you hold the poses for so long and the transitions out are slow and getting back in are slow. Usually a typical hour 15 class, you might only hit 6 to 8 postures. Hands-on adjustments are always invited when you do yin yoga as a teacher, although you want to honor that Goldilocks principle where you want to assume that your student is at their edge, and by going and pushing them deeper into the pose, you might be affecting their judgment and their preference of depth for the pose. So whenever I adjust, I'm very gentle-handed in yin yoga. The adjustments are very similar to the hatha, just with a little more passive adjustments, I guess you could say. And if you want to learn more about yin yoga, you can go to a website called yinyoga.com. It's the one I always reference when creating yin yoga classes. They have a list of all the postures, how to get into them, details about what joints are affected, how long to hold the pose, contraindications, etc. And they even have, for most postures, a little YouTube video that shows you how to cue your students into the pose, and then how to modify if you have, a student with issues that keep them from getting into the posture. So it's a really helpful resource. If yin yoga is something that you're very interested in pursuing, I would be happy to help you and kind of guide you in the direction for learning more and gaining more experience. So feel free to reach out to me, and I